Well, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today.
Absolutely.
Kind of wanted to talk about the AEA bill,
Yep.
your big reform.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've said recently was that the state doesn't need 9, and I was just kind of curious, why we wouldn't need 9 here.
Well, first of all, let's start with the system. The system right now is is not providing our students with disability the services that they need, and that's despite $5,300 more per person than the national average, and yet we're performing poorer than a lot of the states that are spending a lot less than Iowa on students with disabilities. And that is reflected not only in the NAEP, which is the National Scorecard, but also with our state assessment. And then we have the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, that has also targeted or said that Iowa is a needs of assistance state because of our low performing scores. And so something is not working with the system. So what I've said is we need to take a look at the system, and most importantly, I think the 3 big changes that we're making, and the 9 regions is part of it, but the 3 big changes that we're making is that the money will stay with the districts, and so it will be local control, and they will have 100% control of the special education funding. The way the system is right now, that money flows through the school district to the AEAs, and then they're mandated by current code to use the AEA for the services. They're not really sure what the services cost. If they're not happy with the services, there's absolutely no recourse, nothing they can do differently to get the students that they're serving a different service. But if they love the services that they're getting, then they continue to use the AEAs. We also don't have proper oversight, and so the bill would stand up the Division of Special Education in the State Department of Education. General supervision is required through federal law that the Department of Education provide that, and we've outsourced that to the AEAs, and so now we'll have a division that will help with supports and systems and really help our special education teachers and our school districts provide the resources that they need to help the kids and hopefully elevate the scores. So those are really the 2 main changes of the bill, and it doesn't mandate that we reduce the number of regions. We've done that before. We went from 15 to 9, so as we just start to move through the realignment, there should be some adjustment. I do believe we need to reduce the administrative cost and the overhead that we have with 9 chiefs that on an average are making about $330,000 a year. To be able to reduce that overhead, put it back into the system and on the ground and into the classrooms and into the teachers and the speech pathologist and the individuals that are providing these services. So it'll reduce the overhead. Money stays the same, bucket doesn't change. AEAs do not go away. They continue to provide the services. We're just going to be, the way that they do that will look a little bit differently.
And so while this is, undergoing this reform, some have said, they have concerns it might hurt rural Iowa, rural districts a little bit more. If we do see some close or some, consolidate, how do we ensure that, those districts are still?
Well, first of all, I don't see a lot of changes the first year as we worked through the realignment. Again, we put the funding in control of the school districts. So if you're a rural school district and you like the services that you're getting from your AE, none of that will change. We'll be able to take a look at the breakdown. We're providing a lot of overhead, and that probably at some point might not be necessary, that we can, again, build out the individuals that are actually providing the services in the classroom for the teachers in the school districts across the state. So the funding formula doesn't change, the amount of money that the schools are getting right now, and they really don't know what they only know the state portion. The federal money, as it is right now, goes right to the AEA. So they actually will get the state, the federal, and then one of the changes that we made that will be filed in the amendment that hopefully we'll get this week also gives them the general education services money that's funded through property tax. They will get that money too, and they will be able to use that money to purchase the services for the students. And they're the ones that are closest to them. They should determine whether the AEAs are meeting their expectations or not. And if they are, nothing has to change. The money doesn't change, it stays the same. They can continue to use their AEAs, but if they want to partner with a neighboring school district and bring a speech pathologist in 1 to 2 days a week, they can do that based on the funding. But I think, there needs to be some accountability. You can't mandate that the funds go to this entity, then say they are mandated to provide the services and have absolutely not sufficient check and balances in place to make sure that they're doing what they should be doing. And plus, to be honest, they have taken on more and more and more and kind of not focused as much on special education. And with the scores where they're at, we need to do better. When you've got NAEP saying in the last 5 years we've ranked 30th and below for students with disability on 9 out of 12 assessments, when you have our state assessment in spring of 2023 said there was a 41% deficiency between students with disabilities and all other students. And again, when you have the federal government stepping in and saying since 2018, I think it was, tagged us as a state with our special education services and needs assistance. If we are identified as that for one more year, then they will step in and start requiring some changes be made. And it was based on, again, scores and general supervision that's not being provided.
And so one of the things that we're kind of hearing from some Iowans who work at the AEAs is that they're worried about, losing their jobs. Mm-hmm. Where do you kind of expect them to go if they are laid off?
Well, so where does the children come into this? Who's responsible for our children's scores? I mean, who cares? Who's standing up for these students with disabilities? First of all, the oversight coming in, that would be a net reduction, but there's a lot of school districts out there that are looking for special education teachers. There are a lot of school districts out there that could potentially hire or share some of these individuals that are in the AEA system. Right now, they have 6 times the employees that the Department of Education has, 3,400 versus 555. One of the reasons I started taking a look at this is I had school districts and superintendents saying, hey, they're pulling our teachers out of the classroom. They're pulling our teachers out of the classroom. They don't have to deal with some of the issues in the classroom, and they're paying them twice as much as what I can pay them in a rural school district. So, they're taking our principals. I was hearing that. They're going over to the AEA. So there will be opportunities in the school districts across the state. There will be opportunities at the Department of Education for the Bureau of Special Education. There will be an opportunity, and that's not all in Des Moines. Those positions are located throughout the state, so that's another misconception that's out there. They're saying I'm going to centralize everything. That is not true. They'll still be dispersed across the state. But I think really, I think the number one question should be, well, who's going to help these kids get the education that they deserve? And how are we going to improve those scores? Because for 20 plus years, we have performed below the national average on students with disability while putting more money into the system. So who's responsible for that? This will help address that.
And then I just had a quick kind of clarification on the new amendment that you guys are going to put out there soon. So it said that you're still going to include the general education and the media services as part of the AEAs. Does that include things like mental health and things like that?
Yeah, that's part of it. They can still provide that, so that's included in it through some professional development. There'll just be some oversight by the DE to make sure that it's evidence-based and that we're all working on the same strategies. But it does include that. The money that I pulled out was a separate allocation that we can work with, contract with professionals to help provide those services, but it's actually 2 different things. So media service, federal money, federal dollars, state dollars, education services go directly to the school districts, local control. They'll have 100% control over the funds. Media services, we've eliminated it. That was put in place in the 70s with technology and innovation. There's different opportunities that we can go to your business on Main Street and utilize them for some of the printing services. But in addition to that, we did say, based on a limited criteria, they can also use some of those special education service funding for media services. It's just a designated group.
For sure. And then next thing I wanted to take a look at was the postpartum coverage from 2 months to 12 months.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, about the reasoning? And then I did have a specific question kind of about the income limit dropping. Yep. So what happens to maybe moms who had qualified for 2 months? Do they still qualify for 2 months, or would that be?
When the bill is passed, the limit, the FPL will change. But right now we're the highest in the country, and we only have it for 60 days. And so we wanted to preserve it, but make sure that, extend it, but make sure that those that truly need it are eligible for it. So we brought the federal poverty level down, so a single mom with a baby making $42,000 would qualify, and she would qualify her and the baby not for just 2 months, but for 12 months. And even with the changes that we've made, we're still 13th in the country. So it's not like by making that change, I dropped to the 50th. In the country. We're actually 13th in the top 25%, and so we'll be able to provide that coverage longer, and that's what we need to do. We want to make sure that they get off to a good start, that they're stabilized. I think with that, and then with the Thrive Iowa, the platform that we're standing up with the navigators, between those two things, it really is about helping facilitate and amplify what some of our churches, our nonprofits, and some of our businesses are really doing to really help people that need these services have one front door, have somebody that can help find them the things that they need, the services that they're looking for, and again, just help get them stabilized and off to a really good start, and really on the road to sustainability.
And then another thing, that you've tried in the past, the over-the-counter birth control. Yeah. I was curious what your plan would be for that, because I know last year in the House we had some concerns from some Republicans, saying they want the patient to be able to see a doctor maybe 3 months into getting that over-the-counter birth control. Is that something that you would be okay with, or was it more of they could just kind of come and get the birth control?
We filed it's the same bill we had last year, so we're going to go back with the same one. The federal government has made some over-the-counter, one particular one, so they've already started to move in this direction. And we made a lot of those adjustments in the bill that we filed last year, so we're going to go back up with that again. And again, I think that's part of the package too. Ultimately, we want to reduce abortions, and so we want to make sure that they have the resources to be able to prevent an unplanned pregnancy. And I believe this is one way that we can do that. So we're going to continue to work with the legislature and see if we can't get that across the finish line into my desk this year.
And so I just wanted to clarify, I haven't been able to see your proposal again this year, but do they have to see a doctor at a certain point?
I think that's where we ended up at some point a year in. At some point they need to do some kind of certification, but I think they do at some point. I'm sorry, I can't remember that exactly because we did a lot of different iterations to try to, that's how it works, to get the number that we need to get it passed through each chamber. And so it would be the same bill that we filed last year.
Gotcha, for sure. And then obviously we had the recent school shooting at Perry High School where we lost 2 people, and obviously the topic of gun safety laws, things like that, always kind of come up. Are there any gun safety laws or any laws that you think would help protect kids at school more?
Well, unfortunately, it's just that wouldn't have prevented what happened at Perry, and my heart and prayers continue for the entire Prairie community and the families that have been impacted by this, the students, the teachers, the educators. It's horrific. It's no phone call that any governor wants to get. I am proud of the fact that 2 years ago we tried to address some of this because it's obviously been happening around the country. We stood up the Governor's School Safety Bureau and put $100 million into it. We provided an assessment free of charge to every single school district for all the buildings to look at vulnerabilities, to try to identify some areas that they would be vulnerable, to try to harden the schools and the buildings. And so we did that. Almost all of them took advantage of it. And then in addition to that, we provided $50,000 per building to help cover some of the cost to correct the vulnerabilities. We've provided training. We've provided an electronic mapping of the school that the first responders have access to, so immediately they can help identify where they're at and how they can get to potentially an active shooter. The radios, we provided those for every school district. That was really instrumental in the response to the Perry school shooting. They were there within minutes. They had just a textbook response. It saved lives. Of course, the principal was a hero by doing what he did. He certainly saved lives as well. And then the training that DPS is providing a lot of our local law enforcement and first responders, and actually some of the individuals on the local PD there had just gone through the training. So we've done that. And then just another component of this is mental health with social media, the breakdown of the family, just the divisiveness that we see. You know, COVID had a huge impact on our kids. There's no way that you can't have that's not a factor in what we're seeing today. And we've done a lot with mental health. It's been a priority of mine since I was first elected governor. I got a children's mental health system stood up that they talked about for 20 years and hadn't done anything, and really looking at how we provide those services. I talked about Ember Recovery Campus in the condition of the state. That brings on 70 behavioral health beds, and then some of the realignment that we're trying to do out in the state to really, again, get the dollars on the ground, into people, and helping them address, making sure that they're getting the services that they need when and where they live. And so I think hopefully a lot of those changes will help with that too. We increased fees for behavioral health providers. They hadn't been increased for a long time, and then made mental health a telehealth for mental health, payment parity, and made schools a site of service. So we'll continue to evaluate that.
For sure. And so I was up here at the Second Amendment Day, and they had talked about, the program about arming teachers, training and arming teachers potentially.
Yep.
And I know last year we saw 2 schools, want to take the approach, and then they had to repeal it because insurance companies, wouldn't provide coverage for them. Is that something that, you could see yourself backing, or?
Well, we've continued to look at it and work with it. These are school districts that are actively asking for it. And I did visit one of them that was actively asking for it. And I was so impressed with just the parameters that they had put in place, the training that they would require whoever would be able to utilize them. It was a very well thought through, laid out plan. So at some point there just isn't a lot of history of that, but we have to continue to look at the insurance piece of it. Right now, they've not been able to provide funding that they can afford for them to do that, just because we just have to understand what the cost of not versus doing that. And so they're continuing to look at it and look at what that looks like going forward, and that's what we need to continue to do. Just look at it, see where the obstacles are at, if it makes sense to address that, or if there's another alternative. But again, that was a school district that made the decision to do that. It wasn't a top down, it was a local up. They had done the research, looked into it, put a lot of planning and thought into the process, and they made a very compelling argument about why they wanted the ability to do that.
And we've also talked about, SROs, different security purposes at school. Could we see you back anything like that?
Well, it's so funny because, when we had the all anti-law enforcement, we didn't hear in Iowa, but with the BLM riots and just all of the talk about, going after law enforcement, we stood behind our law enforcement and backed our law enforcement. And it's why, for the most part, our communities are safe. It's why, that's what people are looking for when they're moving to states. That's what businesses are looking for. And at that time, we saw school districts taking the SROs out of the school districts because of the whole narrative. And I think you're starting to see them rethink that just a little bit and bring them back. That was never anything that I advocated for. It was actually, again, what different school districts were doing. It was a choice by their board. It was to actually remove the SROs. So that's a local decision, but I think you are starting to see a reversal in maybe bringing them back in to help protect the kids.
For sure. And then kind of switching gears a little bit to the caucus. The caucus was called very quickly that night. Do you see this at all being a problem?
Well, yeah, I think it was very disrespectful to the citizens of Iowa who on a very, very cold night bundled up, took the time to exercise and be a part of democracy, and it was extremely disrespectful of the media to call a caucus when a lot of them, the individuals, they weren't even through the speeches. So extremely disrespectful to the people of Iowa that wanted to participate in the process.
For sure. And you endorsed DeSantis, and Donald Trump seemed to criticize that very heavily. Looking back, would you do it the same, or is there anything that you would maybe change?
Yeah, it wasn't about Donald Trump, and it wasn't about me. It was a personal decision. I have a lot of respect and admiration for both Ron and Casey. They are incredible people. They have a foundation of faith and family. I saw it played out every single day. He is an incredible leader. I got to know him during COVID. I often say we were on an island, and we were on an island under extreme pressure from the media as well as the White House to shelter in place, shut down businesses, keep kids out of school, enforce a mask mandate. I mean, the list goes on, and was able to stand strong and really eventually, you know, we all kind of shut down for a while, but to really take a look at the people that we serve, give them the information, and then trust them to make the best decisions for themselves and their family. And we did that. And then I just, you know, really looked at his record of what he's done in Florida, took on big issues, and he was very successful, followed through with 100% of his promises. And most importantly, he could serve for 2 terms. And that's really what I feel that this country needs: steady competence, leadership for not just 4, but for 8 years. And I felt like he checked those boxes.
And, you know, kind of going forward, we're seeing obviously the New Hampshire primaries tonight. You have Donald Trump, Nikki Haley. Do you have a preference between either of those two on who?
No, I have said whoever the Republican nominee is, I will support. I mean, it looks like Trump's probably the front runner at this point, seriously. And so, you know, whoever it is 100 times better than President Biden. I mean, what he has done to this country in 3 years is unconscionable. I can't even believe what's happening at the southern border. It's just, it's intentional. It's a dereliction of duty that he is not doing his constitutional responsibility in protecting the sovereignty of this country, let alone the citizens, the drugs, the human trafficking, the chaos that's pouring across this border is the terrorist. You know, I mean, the list goes on, and at some point, if we don't get this stopped, we're going to pay a significant price in this country. It's ridiculous. And then look at the inflation, the high cost, and then look at our country's weakness on the world stage. It is very dangerous right now. And I believe with Republican leadership, we will secure the border, we will provide common sense, and we will install just some sanity to what we see happening out in Washington, D.C. right now.
And then I had a question about the parental rights law that's going through the courts. One of the things that we saw in the courtroom was the talking about the gender identity and sexual orientation instruction. The state lawyer said that that wasn't meant to apply to books. And I think that kind of caught a lot of us by surprise because we thought it did. Can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Well, no, I can't comment on an active case. And that's standard procedure. You know, if we're still in the midst of it, I'm not going to weigh in because then it gets brought in. So we'll let the courts make their determination, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Okay. One thing that you know, we had talked about, or your office had talked about whenever we met before the condition of the state, was something requiring an age verification when a website has a certain amount of pornography on it for, you know, they said it was to protect minors. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and why you feel that would be necessary?
Well, because again, I mean, I think the social media and the porn sites, everything that they have access to is not healthy for our kids today. So we've got a bill that we're going to drop here shortly that will start to address that. So if you stay tuned, I hope this week we'll drop that bill that starts to address some of those issues that we see happening not only in Iowa but across the country.
For sure. Well, thank you again for taking the time to speak
Thank
with
you.
me.